Welcome to the RSP NFL Scouting Glossary. I'm Matt Waldman with the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. The RSP is a publication devoted to scouting skill position prospects on the offensive side of the ball. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end is one of the most purchased draft guides as a cross-reference device for NFL scouts, according to recruiters that I know, including guys like SMU's recruiting director Alex Brown, who visits with these guys on a weekly basis and lets me know that these guys mention the RSP and have been seen with the RSP on a regular basis when they come to talk with Alex about the prospects that are at his school, and they do that on a weekly basis. So I'm doing a glossary of terms talking about what I look for with each of the positions. It's a running project that I'll be doing that's on YouTube as well as on my site, mattwaldman.com. If you've just seen this video once and don't know where to find it, you can go to Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room to find more of these. We're going to talk about releases this week, and the release, specifically the release stance and release motion. And we're going to use, once again, Ohio State wide receiver Jaxon Smith-Njigba as an example of that. He's slot left here, and we're going to get to the video part of it first just to show you kind of what he does here. And there's a number of little components here that you can see of him coming off the line, pads over his knees. We see that, see his arms moving. What is it about the stance that's so important? Well, wide receiver play bears a lot of similarities to pass rushing. Receivers and pass rushers are both trying to gain ground on an opponent from a static stance. They both are positions that have to manipulate their opponent to generate an advantageous path. And both positions have to know maneuvers where they attack and defend their leverage. And the stance is the foundation for all of these requirements. It means that the stance has to do three things. It has to facilitate explosion and pose a threat that every release will lead to a vertical route. As you can see right here, Smith-Njigba looks like he's going deep out of this. I mean, you can see the arms are pumping wide. He looks like a sprinter's stance right there. So you want to facilitate that explosion and pose a threat that you are going downhill. We'll talk about more of that in a minute. It also eliminates the potential for any wasted movement that can give an opponent a first move advantage if playing the receiver tight. Well, in the video example, if you're listening to this on the podcast, you can find that again at Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room. But in the video example, you can see Smith-Njigba isn't facing press coverage here because I didn't want to complicate matters with how I'm giving this definition. But the fact of the matter is that if a defender knows that a receiver takes an extra step off his back foot and he's playing tight, he can get first contact and disrupt the receiver's movement. So you want to avoid that. Also, a defender playing off could see might be able to find tells where if a receiver rocks off his back foot with certain types of routes, that he can tell that the receiver is going to run that type of route. So no wasted movement is very important. The release also disguises the receiver's true intentions in terms of a neutral body position, because really that's that whole thing, that net neutral of every time a receiver is running a route, if he can make it look like a vertical route, a go route, a 9 route, that deep route where you're going to force the defense to be fearful that they might run past you, that's going to force the defensive back to turn his hips and run with the receiver downfield. And if you can get that to happen, you're a long way towards being able to manipulate the defender and get open, even if you're going deep. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But the net neutral for every receiver is to make every release look like they could potentially be running a vertical route and then manipulate the defender off that. So when a wide receiver has an efficient and comfortable stance, he can do a lot of things that are going to get him separation. So what are the components of a good release stance? Let's go back to Smith-Njigba here in his stance. And you're going to see with him, first of all, his feet are staggered. You can see right here that he has the back knee aligned with the front heel. Now, it doesn't mean that it has to be exact. This isn't German engineering here. We're talking about him being, the feet are apart. You want to have that as a guideline, but you also want the receiver to be comfortable enough so that they can be efficient with their stance and movement so that they're explosive. Then you also have a balanced stance, and that means that you want to have about an 80-20 weight ratio distribution 80% of the weight on the front foot, 20% on the back foot. If you look at Smith-Njigba here, you're going to see that there's an 80-20 stance pretty much right there. If you go further to the outside, single right, you see Chris Olave. He's close to an 80-20 stance too, and that looks pretty well distributed. I can't tell which receiver this is. It could either be Marvin Harrison Jr. or Garrett Wilson here on the outside. I don't see the number, and it's not that important to me, but you can see that this stance is an 80-20. It's a little bit more like, it actually looks more like 50-50 or 60-40 in weight distribution between front and back foot, and the front leg is locked out. So that's not a great stance. Now, they're all facing off coverage, so it's not going to affect them as much when you're talking about a defender potentially jamming them, but you want to see it consistent from route to route, regardless of what the coverage type is too. So this 80-20 by Smith-Njigba is good. The other things you want to look at is that this really it facilitates explosion off the line, no wasted movement. It reduces the potential for the defender to contact them. And then the stance should have some bend in the knees and the hips. And you can see Smith-Njigba has a slight bend in the knees and hips there. It's an athletic stance, to facilitate balance. The bend shouldn't be too low, or defenders are going to be able to easily jam the receiver. If it's high, they can be easily jammed because they're going to be slower to come off the line and their leg's going to be locked out, So you're not really getting a comfortable movement there. It's going to create wasted movement. This also sets the stage for the receiver to deliver an efficient and explosive release motion. And the components of a good release motion are the initial steps from the stance. The best route runners sell the potential of the vertical route, specifically the deep go or 9 route with every release, like I said. And they do this so that they can compel the defender to believe it's a deep route. They'll turn their hips to keep up. And even if the route's actually a deep go, they still do this. There's some exceptions where receivers will try to manipulate a defender by believing they're running a shallow route, making them believe that, while running a deeper route by, they'll start off maybe with a slower pace and then speed up. But most receivers still begin with a deep route using that explosive release motion. And they try to manipulate the defender in a different manner because it's harder for defenders to guess a route if every route begins the same way. So when we talk about that release motion, to begin with, we just saw right there with Njigba Smith. Watch the bend right there. See how he goes from low to lower. That allows him to facilitate the drive off of that front foot to really start to accelerate. It allows him to get his arms in position to begin pumping them. You can see that he's got his inside arm behind his trunk, working back behind his trunk. His sideline arm is working up in front of him with the elbow bent and the fist coming up towards his helmet. And that gets him into that sprinter's gait to maximize acceleration. Pads are coming over the knees. The head is coming down, but the eyes are still facing upward. And then he's rolling off the front foot with no rocking, no extra steps off the back foot, maximizing that release. And then when he comes off, you see the arms are pumping. Now they're pumping the opposite direction slow. You see that he has come off with no extra releaser. The head is up and forward and eyes are up. And you can see it in here where I've frozen it. You can see the front leg coming forward even further. He's got a nice wide stance, coming out of that with the pads over that front knee, eyes up. This just really sells the perception of going deep. It sets a tempo. Even if he stops within 3 steps before he even reaches the defender, he's sold the defender to at least hang still and not try and climb. So it's at the very worst, you're making the defender assess the fact that you may really be sprinting hard, even if he doesn't fully believe it yet. He's not banking on it by trying to climb or jump the route. He's going to at least hold his ground, and to the point that he realizes that he's going to have to turn and run. So these components sell the perception that the receiver's going deep, and it allows the receiver to attack the defender at full speed immediately, which can force the defender out of position. And when the receiver forces the defender to account for an explosive release, it allows the receiver to use his feet to manipulate the defender further out of position. And if the defender is playing tight to the line, a receiver stance helps him maintain a balanced position. And we'll look back right there. I mean, if you're in a balanced position like this, that helps them efficiently anticipate and counter any physical contact from the defender. And the most common issues that receiver coaches have to correct with young pros is usually in the stance. Stance is locked out like this. There's extra movement with the foot when they come off the line. Their hands are crossed, and they're not able to efficiently deal with contact. But Jaxon Smith-Njigba does a great job, low to lower, 80-20 position, rolling off the front foot, no wasted motion off the back foot, pads over the knees, pumping the arms. Brings the head down a little bit here. Not a big deal, because before he even finishes that first step off the line, his head is up, eyes looking downfield, selling that vertical. That's a perfect look. If you looked at that stance right there and superimposed it with sprinters who've already come out of the blocks and they're in their acceleration phase, it would look very much the same. And that's what you want. You want to sell that. And when you do that, you're really setting up your routes for success. And if you're playing against tight coverage with a good stance, you're putting yourself in position to at least be able to handle a wide variety of attacks that a defender can give, and then still efficiently get off the line and get into your route. Thanks again for watching. For more RSP scouting glossary videos or film room scouting report videos, you can check out all of them at my YouTube channel, Matt Waldman's RSP Film Room, or go to my site, mattwaldmanrsp.com.